Did the iPad time out on you?
No. Still here.
First podcast, babe.
Yay. Are you ready?
We're in there. Shout out to Andy Mineo. Coming in hot. Just like a fajita.
Really?
Yeah. I'm tired. It's like 2 in the morning, right? No, 1 something.
No, it's 2:13 actually.
I'm a bad husband.
No, don't say that. Don't say that at all. You're not.
What's up, podcast? We are officially on the other side. We're on the other side of JesusGeek TV. So we're on the podcast side now. Yeah. How you feel about that, babe?
I'm actually ready. It's about that time, like you said.
I got my ROD with me. I have my lovely wife with me. There will be no cutting because she does not want to be on camera today.
Oh,
So
no.
it's fine. She's a little camera shy. So that's cool. But nonetheless, she will be helping me with episode numero uno. 1. Yeah. So it's always interesting when you're trying to figure out what's going to be your first topic. Because I have conversations all the time, all day long, all the time, all day long, all the time, all day long.
Yeah.
Now, some people might be like, all the time, all day long. Oh, okay. All the time, most of the day long.
I would say when you're not
That's
sleeping.
what I'll say. Yeah, definitely when I'm not sleeping. Because I definitely will stop my work at work to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm like having like many interventions at work, and and intercessory prayer sessions at work for like 2 hours, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm getting paid to work.
Yeah, but it's been like that since the beginning for you.
It has been.
Yeah.
That'll be another story for another day, though, right? So, since it's a podcast, right? I was like, I'm not gonna kill myself with what topic I'm going to talk about because there's oh so many. But I did figure, based on my analytics and what I can see geographically about my channel, I did feel like, well, I did agree with you that this would be a good topic to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
You actually suggested it, so I'm gonna give you your flowers. I wasn't like really confused about what I would start with, but I was kind of like, okay, does it need to be super theological and super hermeneutical, and I'm exegeting scripture left and right, and then I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that on a podcast, right? So you're like, babe, you do so well talking about generations and generational things, and I'm thinking to myself, like, we haven't had this conversation. I said this. I was like, I haven't talked to you about this in mad long, but you remembered it, so it must have been impactful.
It was. It's been about a year and a half, close to 2 years since we first actually watched the, I guess it was a leadership podcast, Craig Rochelle's. Yeah.
So, yeah. I honestly think the Holy Spirit agreed with you, because at first I'm like, we haven't had this conversation in so long. Why is she bringing this up? But then, it's like the moment I turned to it and I started to rewatch it to refresh myself, I was like, this makes sense. Thank God for smart wives. So we just are going to cover Gen Z today, right?
Yep.
Gen Z tonight, this morning, dark morning. And yeah, I said this to you earlier, but I said, I don't understand how pastors could, 1, not want this information, and 2, not obtain this information and not say, I can shepherd my congregation better with this.
Yeah.
So I know if Cam were here, I feel like he would agree with me if I said they're probably going to say like, oh, here we go. This is like a younger pastor talking about generational stuff again. But I'm telling you, like, the proof is in the pudding. Like, the statistics, they talk about it. So, I mean, and you've seen on my channel in the past when I've done things and we've talked about mental health, mental illness, you know, I'm running over statistics and things like that. And it's just kind of like, man, like, again, how can pastors not want this information or obtain this information and not say, I can pastor my congregation better? So, yeah, I think that this generational data that I've been obsessed with for a couple of years, I think is super beneficial for pastors.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's super beneficial for managers, leaders in general.
Yeah.
Leaders in general, like, and we've talked about that across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't see how you can have this information and not become a better leader, a better manager, a better pastor, you know, a better youth pastor, whatever capacity you're working or serving in. But yeah, I think this is extremely helpful.
It is. You know, I wasn't even thinking about it that way until you said it. And I'm like, you know what? This is like, this will be really beneficial to being a boss or a manager or a pastor. It's like, it helps you understand people more. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look tired.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a bad husband.
Oh,
But yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Gen Z. And we're going to talk about Gen Z. I'm going to go through, well, it's really 5 generations, but we could say 6 if I include Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
Even though there's not much information on them because they're kids. So there's just not a lot of data on them yet because they're still growing up. Yeah, so if they're from about, you know, 2010 to 2024, at most, some of them are like becoming teenagers. Yeah. So it's like the data will start to increase. But it's not a lot out there for Gen A, Gen Alpha, but I could still cover them. But without them, we have the silent generation, the boomers. We have Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. So I'm going to go through all of the generations, sharing this statistical data. And I'm really sharing this data because one reason I found it extremely beneficial when you sit down and you go through the generations and you kind of like go through the events of what happened within that generation, and you kind of see like pivotal moments, you know, like, you know, with the boomers, it's like, especially the beginning of the boomers, it was the Great War, you know, with the millennials, like they kind of say 9/11's really our defining moment for us, you know. So yeah, it's a couple of pivotal moments that really, I don't want to say kind of define a generation, but it's that where were you when question, like where were you when ... happened, you know? So like for us, it's like, where were you when 9/11 took place? Right. And it's like most millennials that you speak to today, it's like it's like, boom, they know exactly where they were, what they were doing, what was happening. You know, I distinctively remember being in math class, like, you know, and there being a TV off to the side where there used to be like boxed, televisions that were like bigger than a microwave. That's like dinosaur age now. Yeah. But it's like, and it would be on like, remember the stand? Like the teachers were like, it was like this tall stand and they had like shelves.
With wheels at the bottom, yeah.
It's the nostalgia for me, man. Yeah. I'm telling you. But yeah, it's like, I remember one of those like being over there and like, I remember the teacher turning it on and like us watching. I remember seeing the tower, like the first plane hit the first tower, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, is this real?
Yeah.
Like, I remember that being like my first thought, like, is this really happening, or like, are we watching a movie or something? Yeah, and then after that, just like complete terror.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll save that for when we talk about millennials. I don't want you to share it yet.
Yeah, I won't.
Yeah, I don't want you to share it yet. But yeah. So go ahead. What we're gonna go over a conversation that Pastor Craig Groeschel was having with Jason Dorsey, and he is a gentleman who is a generational data analyst. I want to say he's an expert in this area.
Yeah, expert is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he does this. You know, he studies this stuff. He goes around. He talks to people about this stuff. He helps empowers managers and companies and even churches. So yeah, I think it's super awesome data. So we're gonna kind of go through the generations, and we're just gonna kind of talk about what we find in this generation, how it also can cross over to how can we help pastor that generation better. Right. Or if we're not pastors, how can we help counsel that generation better? How can we help evangelize to that generation better? Mm-hmm. You know, like based on the things that we can find out about statistical data, right? Yeah. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, let's go through it.
Okay. So right now, who is the youngest generation?
Well, based on the way it is, it should say the youngest generation studied. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, the youngest, because right now, technically, the youngest generation would be Gen Alpha. Yeah. Because they're younger than them. Yeah. So, but the youngest generation being studied is actually Gen Z the most.
Because the most. They have more information about them.
Yeah, because they're older now. They believe that and they say this can fluctuate, but that the oldest Gen Zer is about 23.
Okay, so that's about the oldest. What does it start at?
Their years of birth are, I believe statistically they say they're from like the late 1990s to like the early 2000s. So like maybe from like 1998.
Okay.
Oh yeah, to about maybe 2009.
Okay.
Or maybe 2011 the latest, but I would say it's from like the late 1990s to the early 2000s.
Right. Okay. Okay. So Jason mentioned that Gen Z is largely raised by Gen X, and also some baby boomers if they had their children late.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So can you have, let's see, you have
two siblings.
Gen Z,
probably 3.
3?
Yeah, probably. I'm thinking.
Is that from here?
I'm thinking Frank Falls there.
He does.
I'm thinking he does.
He's, how old is he?
I think he's 23.
Oh, he's younger than Nicole? Because Nicole's 24.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I believe he is. Like I can double check, but okay. So yeah, I have 3, possibly 2 siblings that are Gen Zers, and they have a mom who is a baby boomer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So now.
So like, what does
that kind of look like?
Yeah, like when Jason was talking about that. I mean, I guess at that point, what he was trying to make a point about that the reason why Gen Z is such, a different generation is because like most of their parents are Gen Xers, and then the type of generation Gen Xers are. So I won't go into Gen Xers today anyway. Yeah. But that's kind of what he was saying. Like when he was giving information on Gen Zers, he was pretty much saying like, they're largely raised by Gen Xers. Right. So like just kind of identifying like who their parents are, and where their parents might be in life right now. So remember I said like probably a really young Gen Xer would be about 42.
Right.
You know, maybe, 42. You know, in mid-age, they would probably be more about like maybe 48.
48.
Yeah, so it's like he's just kind of giving us some details about who their parents are. So Gen Z is largely raised by Gen Xers. And we're not going into Gen X today, but let me just say, I love Gen X. They are natural skeptics.
Yeah.
Like, you're getting the third degree about everything. Like, and that's literally, I mean, I literally love that about them. I can't hold you. So, yeah, that's what Jason was talking about.
You know, I think at the end of going over all of these, and I think you should do the alphas, the Gen alphas, I think you should go into it the way you talked to me about it earlier. Like the baby boomers, yeah. I don't want to say too much. Okay.
Yeah, I can do it like that. And I think it's a big deal, this point that he's talking about here, like Gen Zers being largely raised by Gen Xers, possibly some boomers, because that's going to make a difference. Like they have this statistical data about the generation as a whole,
Right.
but that definitely is going to differ based on what generation their parents are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we already know that based on what generation you were in, your non-religious affiliation was higher at the time than another generation. Because we know all this done is raised since, the silent generation. Yeah. It's only gone up. So they've been the lowest generation. So yeah, it tells us a lot.
It does. It does. So now, Jason mentioned when he was talking to Craig that Gen Z doesn't remember much of 9/11 and how that was such a defining moment. It wasn't as much defining for them as it was for millennials. So can you tell me, where were you?
Or tell you guys, right?
So us, yeah.
It's kind of like, that I thought that was pretty pivotal, just because the way he put it, like kind of like the way I said it earlier, like the where were you when ... this happened. So it's kind of like he's basically saying with Gen Zers, like they were too young to remember 9/11. So
where were they then? Like what age range would they be at that time that they wouldn't remember it? That's what I was trying to ask earlier.
Right.
Sorry.
You got to think, if they were born in 98, you know what I mean? Like where they would be at if they were born in 2008. You know, if they were born in 08, they would only be like 4. You know what I mean? Like, so maybe 3.5. So it's kind of like they're not very old. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that children at this age can't be smart and retain information. Clearly they can. But what he's saying is that they're not at an age to where it would have been very pivotal to them. Like, whereas for me, when 9/11 happened, I was at an age where it's like, it really changed my life. It made me think more about the military. You know, I started being a lot more aware of my surroundings because of 9/11. So that's why even till this day, you know, when you and I travel, you know, I still trip if I see like a bag. You know what I mean? Like in the middle of the airport and nobody's around it. I'm like, babe, you see that bag? Like, you know what I mean? Or like, if I just see something like deserted by itself, and for the most part, it's military training. But still, it's still like 9/11 heightened that, because they came out with a lot of precautions after that they started like relaying this information to the public, like, hey, if you see an abandoned bag in the subway, you know, and I'm living in New York at the time, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like we would see this kind of stuff all of the time, but it was super, super crazy around this time because 9/11 had just happened. So it was like everybody was paranoid. Everybody like hated a person from the Middle East. So you could just imagine the craziness that was happening in New York. You know what I mean? Like people are calling each other names, and they're like, they were messing. Like people were like destroying people who were from the Middle East. They were destroying their businesses. It was crazy. You know, so I remember that, but my brothers probably don't remember it nearly in the same way that I do.
Which is crazy.
And Savannah wasn't even born yet.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of like he's saying that moment was so pivotal for the millennial generation because it answers that question for us, like, where were you when 9/11 happened? Right. And like I said earlier, for us, it's kind of like right away we know where we were. It's like, yeah, I remember that day. But for someone who is younger, like maybe for someone today who is 20, you know, they might vaguely, yeah, you know, or like might not remember many important details. So he's basically saying for the Gen Zers, that's important that they don't, you know, remember 9/11. Because
how it didn't have a chance to really affect them, right?
Right. Okay. Right. And you got to think about like how we experience life, the events that people deal with in life. It's like it shapes things, it shapes decisions, it shapes mindsets and ways of living. And it's kind of like for a generation that it's totally unimportant to them for the most part, it probably just didn't affect them the way it affected us.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Which brings us into the next thing. So they were also, Jason was
no, I didn't mean to cut you off, babe.
No, go ahead. What is it?
No, I was just thinking because I was just going to say like, and that's so crazy because 9/11 is just, it's like even now thinking about it, I'm like crazy.
I know. I'm trying not to bring it up like my experience.
Yeah, it's just like crazy.
And that stuff happened.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's just... Yeah, it's still, and it's like when I talk to people around my age about it, we're still super like attached to the moment, you know, invested in it, remembering what happened.
You just remember it so explicitly, like a movie you've seen on rerun, and it's crazy. It's so heart wrenching.
Yeah, that's a great way to put a movie on rerun because it was crazy. Yeah. It definitely was. Okay, all right. What Jason got for us next?
So, what Jason had brought up was that Gen Z became of age during the Great Recession, right? So, they were basically old enough to remember that a little bit, sort of, kind of. Mm-hmm. But young enough that it also shaped how they view the world. So, can you talk about just that real quick?
Yeah, I think what he meant there is kind of like, so it depended on how I would say that recession manifested in that Gen Zer's life. Mm-hmm. Because for some, you know, if your parents were really well off when it happened, you probably still lived pretty well off compared to the average person. But some things might have been different. Right. You know what I mean? But not things that were like maybe detrimentally different. Mm-hmm. But then for some, meaning that they wouldn't have been maybe as well off. Mm-hmm. They were good, but then things got bad. Right. You know, and then for some people, they were average and things got really, really bad. And then for some people, they were bad and things got horrible. You know, so I think it depends on how it manifested in that Gen Zer's life. I think, so if I use my family for an example, I would think with my younger siblings that are, like I have 3 siblings. Well, all of my siblings are younger than me because I'm the oldest. Okay. But I mean, like, as far as my mom, you know how we joke how she has like a first set of kids and a second because she has 6 and she had like the first 3 and then the second 3. So it's kind of like the second set. She's gonna listen to this and be like, I cannot believe him. But yeah, it's like your second set of children. I think the way it manifested in their life was at one point, you know, my mom did do like a lot of moving, you know, just because it was kind of like, as a single mom, you know, it was kind of hard, you know, rent was hard for her, you know, sometimes she would work 2 jobs, you know, and at this point, this was even, she wasn't doing it as much as when I was away in the military, but I could still remember times of her doing it, like maybe for seasons. And, you know, so just with that, just with rent being hard, that already automatically sometimes will put her having to work 2 jobs, which already leaves a deficit in the home. Like, it's already a 1-parent home, and now the 1 parent who is home isn't home, you know? So it's like, I would say that's probably one way that it manifested in my younger siblings' lives. I know they moved a lot. Like, they moved a lot more than her first 3 children did. Right. And we did move, but we didn't move as frequently as they did. I remember my mom going through a season where she moved quite often. And I think that had a large effect on, like, my last 3 siblings, you know, because just, and for lots of reasons, that stability is super important. Like, just being in one spot. We've talked about that because we both have moved.
Oh yeah, mentally, physically, and emotionally, it can do a whole lot to you to move around a lot, whether it be close by to a different house, further away. It doesn't matter. Just that stability and being in one spot as a kid, it means everything to them.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's big for development as well. Oh, yeah, so I think things like that are how it manifested in their life. And I think because it manifested differently in each of their lives, I think that that's why they are the way they are. Like, that generation is very big on delaying things because they don't want to deal with debt. So they're delaying buying cars. They're delaying getting credit cards. They're delaying buying houses. They are not super interested in debt. They don't flirt with it. They don't want to be bothered with it. And I think that that recession and how it manifested in their lives had a lot to do with that.
That's really good. I was about to ask you how you thought that it would it had manifested, or what was the outcome. Just like, because clearly it's a good outcome to want to do those things.
Yeah.
That's a great outcome versus the outcome for, you know, millennials and 9/11, you know.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, I would pray that it doesn't produce a generation of hoarders. Like, meaning in a sense where it's like, you know, this is all mine, and they eventually turn into probably the most selfish generation because they know what it feels like for things to kind of shake up their world, especially at a young age when it's important. And it's like, you know, they'll in a sense kind of be obsessed with that safety net, which isn't a horrible thing, but you know, then it's like, what are you gonna do when something bad happens, which is life? You know, it's like you're gonna fall apart. So yeah, that's what I think he meant by that. So it definitely, I think it has definitely shaped that generation, just simply because, like, they are not interested with flirting with debt at all. They're not even trying to play that game.
But we can work with that. You know, it could be, like you said, let's hope they're not hoarders, but we can work with someone, you know, who's willing to be like that. Because I know for me, and I'm a millennial, it's a whole different story. Until I practice it.
Did he have one more?
Yeah, I'm just a bad sinner, and it turned out.
Wow, I'm not subscribing to that. You said that, not me.
It's okay. We're both sinners.
Oh yeah, I see that last one about tech savvy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that definitely by far, and this is where it's going to get fun to play in between generations. But yeah, by far, Gen Z is a tech savvy generation, if not the most. Like, we've talked about this before. They have never existed without some sort of advanced technology.
So how does that even affect their life right now? How does it make it different than the other generations?
Well, it's what he's saying right there is just the fact where it's kind of like they are more tech savvy. Like, it's actually a myth that millennials are like the most tech savvy generation.
I have heard that.
It's actually a myth. Actually, they say we are the most tech dependent generation, which I can understand that. We talked about that, and I'll get more deep into that part when I'm talking more about millennials. But I know for Gen Z, they by far are the most tech savvy because they've come into the world when electronics were pretty prominent. Like, you know, they didn't come into the world where necessarily Walkmans were hot.
Yeah.
Like Walkmans were a thing for us. When they came into the world, it's like iPads and iPods were already it. You know what I mean? So for them, it's kind of like, yeah, you know, like we're used to this. We've been doing this since we was 3. You know, like it's kind of like, whereas when we were 3, we had like cassette tapes, you know, so it's a difference there. I think they are extremely tech savvy generation. And I think that a lot of workplaces can benefit from that if they're not afraid of like this young person blowing up my building and just kind of like listening to them, you know, and like let them kind of show you like, hey, like there's a different way we can do this, you know, like we can add some automation here where everything's manual, or like, you know, we can like do something digital here where there's nothing digital at all. So I think it's always that fear of like the younger generations trying to kick me out. So that's why some people are struggling. I know a lot of older generations at my job that struggle working with Gen Zers. You know, and it's like, they're always like, they want everything to be a computer. And I'm just like, everything practically is. Like, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, but yeah, you can still learn from them. Just like they can learn from, they can learn from boomers. I mean, we talked about this already. Boomers are it, man. Boomers are it.
They are.
We love boomers.
I can't wait to get into them.
Yeah, me neither. I don't want to tell too much, y'all. So we about to get out of here because it's like a whole almost 2:44 a.m. I'm a bad husband.
No, stop.
But it's you know what? I'm a bad husband. I'll take that. I'll take that. Yeah, y'all. So I enjoyed this time and space with my boo thing, my true thing, my ROD thing. She's gonna be back with me. For the next generational one. We've talked about her being with me for certain parts of the pod. When she is ready to reveal her oh so beautiful face, she will. But I told her I would not pressure her into it. I really just want to take the camera and just like, but I'm not going to do it.
That is bad. Okay, let's not do that. I already agreed to come on here and, you know.
Yes, I know you did, babe. I love you for it. But shout out to you guys. I love you guys. I know my wife loves you guys. We hit 4 years on YouTube this past December.
Woo.
4 years. 4 years.
Has that sunk in for you?
Yes, no, yes, and no. That's the best way I can answer it. It has been a journey with YouTube, but we will talk about that another time. Yes. Yeah. So shout out to you guys, man, for sticking with me as I was on my long hiatus, as I talked about in my last video. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Like this. But if you don't like this, don't like it. You know what I mean? I can dig that. Yeah, I can dig that. But this is a transparent space. You know, it's an open space. I'm very transparent, just like the souls of my Cherry 11s over there. So I like that little sound effect. But yeah. So I appreciate you guys for rocking with me because 5 months was a long time, but I explained a lot of that in my last video. Yeah, and we're back now. We're on the other side. This is what we're doing. JesusGeek TV podcast. Yeah, and episode 1, right? Many more to go. So we love you guys. See you next time. Peace.
Bye.